September of 2012, we left our home port of Seattle on a trip around the world in our Nordhavn 52 Dorona. Hello, this is Jennifer and James Hamilton aboard Nordhavn 52 Dorona in Stornoway, Scotland. In our previous two videos, we removed the defective cylinder head from our generator and replaced it with a brand new one just shipped in from the US. In this video, we complete the job by adjusting the valves, filling up the coolant system, and bleeding the fuel system. After that, we'll investigate whether anything in this installation can be improved for greater longevity in the future.
Well, it's Sunday morning, about 8:30, 8:26 right now, and we've got very little work left to do, so it's almost done. The valves need to be adjusted, the coolant needs to be filled, reassembled, batteries turned back on, auto start turned back on, and then run a test. Let's get going. So what we need here is 10 millimeter and a screwdriver, feeler gauges. Oh, there's Spitfire.
Oh, there's Spit. He was down here before we were, I think.
Yeah,
shortly after we were.
No, he came down as soon as I came down. So what I usually take out is an 8/1000ths of an inch feeler gauge, and then I choose to take a 9/thousandths out as well. And the reason is I take them out is it's just a little tiny bit easier to work with them. These valves have very, very light springs, and so it's easy to accidentally push them open when you're measuring. So I just like to have them free and easy. And the reason I like to have the 9/1000ths of an inch out is just to check to make sure that it is sufficiently tight. So an 8 should pass through nicely, and a 9 should be too tight. First thing I gotta do is have to crank the engine over, turn the engine over, and find a valve find when the exhaust valve is just closing and the intake valve is just open. I forget which one, but when they're both just rocking. The key to that is it's a little harder right now because the valves are not adjusted at all, and so they're barely opening, but it'll work fine. I use a pry bar to turn the engine, so it's easy to turn it. And what I'm looking for right there is number one and I'll take whichever one I can get, but the first one coming up is number one, and number 2 is number 1, and so those valves are just rocking. So this exhaust is just closing up, and the intake's just opening. And so as I move it back and forth, I can see that these valves are rocking. So I'm going to turn it 360 degrees to the exact same point again, which is marked off on the crank pulley as number 1 top dead center. So I will rotate the engine all the way around. There's Spitfire.
Hey, Spit, how are you doing? Checking the work?
Yeah. Okay, so we're just coming back up on number 1. So that is where I will adjust 1.
Before you take that out, let me see if I can get a shot of what you're doing in there, or just put the...
Yeah.
So I can see it, because it's hard to see what's
I just push it around with a pry bar like that. I see,
so you're just pushing. And point to where you said the top dead center mark is.
That's top dead center right there.
Okay, oh, that mark right there, I see.
That mark right there. And this is cylinder 1 I've marked off.
Okay.
Cylinder 2's marked off there, and cylinder 3's marked off 128 degrees the other way. Now that we've got it in the position that we want, we'll adjust the intake and exhaust valve on cylinder number 1. Then we'll do the same thing on cylinder number 2, the same thing on cylinder number 3. Absolutely no reason to do them in order. You can do it any order we want. It's also possible to put it in top dead center number 1, adjust 3 valves, move it around to the other side and adjust the other 3 valves. I find this is the manufacturer recommended procedure, so I choose to follow this one, but the other one works fine too. So what I'm looking for is just a light drag.
So there's a little bit of friction on there.
Yeah. And because this is the first valve, I'm going to check it with a 9 just to make sure that it's too tight. It is. too tight on the 9, and fine on the 8. So that's about where I want it. This is the intake valve. Normally they wouldn't be this loose, but this is all a fresh assembled engine, so it hasn't been done yet. Still feels good. It's about 9 millimeters, and so even though it's only 9 thousandths of an inch, even though it's a tiny amount larger than necessary, on this job it doesn't take too long just to get it. Let's try it again and just to get it the way I want it. Yep, that's
the 9.
That's the 9, just slightly pushing that valve open. Perfect.
So that's 2 of 6 done?
Yeah, 2 of 6. And the reason why I didn't feel bad doing that one the second time, and I've had times when I do it the third time, is there's only 6, and even if there were a lot more, it's well worth getting it right. It's a primitive way of turning it, but it works.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay, so here we're on number 3 cylinder.
And what are you feeling for up there with your left hand?
I'm wanting the valves to be just rocking, where if you see it, one is opening up and one's closing.
I see.
The intake valve's closing, the other one's opening up.
Okay.
See that? So you can see them both moving.
I see.
So when you get it to that point, that means it's 360 degrees wrong.
Okay.
And so turn it exactly 1 turn and put it on the same mark.
Okay.
And you can hear it's a little more work to turn it now because the engine's got compression. So before, earlier, when we didn't have the cylinder head on, it was really easy to turn. Well, now it's still not that hard to turn, but
Yeah. And a bigger engine would be harder, like the Deere. Would that be a lot harder to turn?
much harder. Yeah, that's a 6.8 liter engine. This is a 1.5 liter engine. And so now what we're doing is coming up on Mark 3. And right there.
So where are you lining them up?
That mark to there.
Oh, I see. It says 3. Yeah.
Well, that's me that put it there, but
Yeah.
just for ease of work. You see right there, it's too tight. You can't pull it, and just a little tiny turn, and that's light friction, and that's too loose. So I just turn it up till it's light friction.
I see. So you tighten it down on it, and then try pulling out. Is that kind of the way to do it?
Yeah, I find the right place by doing exactly that, and then I let it float back and forth as I am right now, feeling it going in and out, making sure I'm not pushing the valve open, and it really is correct.
And if you're pushing the valve open, you'd actually see something, or what would you tell?
You can feel the spring pressure if
I
you're
see.
careful, but if you're sloppy, you actually could leave it the wrong position and think.
Okay.
I mean, you can end up thinking you're doing the right thing and you're not.
You need a bit of a delicate touch there.
You just need to be careful, and checking it with the 9 is a good policy because it's an error check. Again, too tight. So what's happening on this one is that last little bit of tightening that I'm putting into it is turning the set screw slightly as well.
So it's adjusting the valve basically.
It's tightening the valve up. So the judgment is just getting it just so it comes to the right spot when it's tightening up.
So that's 3 done.
Not quite, because I keep for some reason this one's just tightening up as I tighten it, and there's really no reason to be quite as picky as I am, but it doesn't take very long. The entire job is going to take minutes, so I really don't mind the time, and I like getting it just exactly right.
Yep.
Because what it allows me to do is measure it precisely in 50 hours and know if this head is operating exactly as it should be.
Yeah.
Where if I'm a little sloppy on how I'm doing it, it's hard to know for sure if there's any issues. Beautiful.
Excellent. So halfway.
Yeah, exactly. See, that one again is just a slight bit. It's about a thousandth of an inch bigger than I want, more than I want. So the 9 just passed through, whereas I really want it to hang up.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked like it just slid freely.
It did. I think what's happening is on film, I'm managing to find ways to make more mistakes than normal. But as I said, it's a simple job, and the only thing that matters is that it be done with patience. Beautiful. Tight.
Great. So you got 2 more left then.
Yep. So now we need to find the right spot on number 2 cylinder. And you can see these two are just rocking. You see that one's going down,
Oh yeah.
and the other one's going up.
Yeah.
So that says we're at the right spot. So now turn it 360 degrees.
And what is the point of once you're at the right spot? Why do you have to turn it to go to the right spot again? What does that do?
Because it's a 4-stroke engine, and so you want to set it at top dead center for that cylinder on compression rather than exhaust and at the end of the exhaust and the beginning of the intake. So you find the end of the exhaust, beginning of intake, and then turn it 1 full turn, and that's the compression stroke, where the valves are both closed.
Okay.
And there, you're on the bottom of the cam lobe, and you can definitely listen to the look.
That's really boring, James. Can you talk about cat food or something?
You can hear the air slowly leaking out of,
Yeah, I thought I could hear something.
out of the engine.
Yeah, you can see that valve going down.
Yeah. I'm just getting down there so I can see the mark exactly.
So is there normally a special tool that people would use to do that job, like to turn it?
A large socket on there would,
I see.
would be nice.
So you just need a socket that's like ginormous, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's sizable. Yeah, that one's too tight, and this is perfect. What happens here is you can see experience makes a difference. Is just as the job goes along, I'm getting a little quicker, and so the last 2 went really fast.
Yeah, they seem to go fast. So it wasn't because of difference. Spit. I'm not sure we need you in there. He's desperately to get up there.
Why?
I don't really know, but he just really wants somewhere. He's trying to find a way up. I think he just needs some attention. And if the engine's in the way, well, so be it. The rocker arm cover.
Yep. What I want to do here is I want to not scratch inside. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing in the center of the O-ring, trying to jam it up, and then out it comes. And then this is a 6,700 hour seal, and it's kind of hard. You can hear it hit. Yeah. It's a little bit hard.
And do that again one more time. I didn't know it quite. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's workable, but it's still sealing. But it's kind of hard. I'm going to throw this out just to get it out of my way since it's oily.
So that would eventually start to basically fail and leak oil?
Oh, they last very, very well. That thing's been, the specs on this engine are to change to adjust the valve lash every 1,000 hours. Yeah. And at the first 50 hours. Okay. So it means it's been off, I think 6 or 7 or 8, well actually many more than that, because we had several quick valve adjustments towards the end. Yeah. So it's been off like almost 10 times. And it probably could do that for quite a bit longer. Okay. But on a big job like this, whenever it comes time, I always change the seals. Just because it's easy to do and you're getting parts anyway.
So that's just a light engine oil you've got in a little bottle there?
It's just standard engine oil. So that's 15W40 standard diesel engine oil. Okay. So there's a more complicated shape here and a nice slope there. So that tells you that that's the way that it goes. Yeah. So I normally just gently set it in and let it kind of find its place, and then I'll push it into the final position. Now I'll push it in.
And the oil helps you with just placing it easier?
The oil's mainly there so it doesn't get damaged itself on installation and clamping down. It doesn't end up taking wear or getting cut.
Happy with that?
Moderately, yeah. Well, there's a couple of spots that aren't quite settling in right yet.
And just because they're sitting a little high?
Yeah. So what I'll do is drop this up here, do a last check for any problems with dirt. Dirt is the enemy of seals, pretty much the enemy of everything. One last check. Not a problem. There we go. That set it in there nicely. Yep, that's perfect. Normally, I'll reuse these little washers, but for the same reason, on a big job like this, I'll just replace everything since there's parts being ordered. One of the things I like to do is I like my hands clean, and so what I'll do is spray them with Simple Green and just wipe them off just to keep the oil film on my hands to a minimum. Helps me work a little bit more quickly and accurately.
Are those parts hard to obtain?
No, easy. Northern Lights has suppliers all over the world, and everything's in stock and easy to obtain. For these ones, the long ones go to the back, the short ones on the sides.
Oh, it's starting to look a lot more like a complete engine again.
Yeah, it's getting there. What I do is I just do these up finger tight, and then I'll do the central ones up, and then I'll do these up. But I do these ones up finger tight just to get it located nice and centrally. We still haven't put coolant in it, but I'm always careful to put these covers on before adding coolant because any spill could end up in the engine.
Ooh, yeah.
So I choose to make that a last operation. A normal valve adjustment would be basically done now, but what we've got to do on this one is have to fill the coolant up. That hasn't been done yet. And then quite a fairly big operation. We have to still bleed the high pressure fuel system since it's 100% full of air with new injectors and the lines have been off. So,
yeah, we've never had to do that before, have we?
No, you're right. I've never had the high pressure lines off. We've had it off on the Deer, but never on this one and never on the wing engine. I guess coolant might be the next operation.
Okay.
Come on, Spitfire. Let's go.
He's very obedient. So I'll be holding this while you pour it in, I think, is how we do it.
What I like to do is I like to pour it into a smaller container first, just because I find this big container too hard to manage over top of the engine and too many mistakes can get made.
Yep. belt cover going back on?
Yep, will in a second. Yep. I think what I'll do is after I get this done up, I'll put the oil back in here to free up some space.
Oh yeah. Oil storage location there. Laz is a little full with all that oil that has been displaced.
Yes. I always do the last little bit up by hand just so they're not over torqued. The other thing I do is for lighter power, lighter strength fasteners is I don't hold full leverage just to make sure I've got good feel for how much pressure is being put on them. Just before putting that front cover on, I'll just clear out the little bits of dust and debris.
I think that's a surprising little mess really from the job. I mean, little bits of dirt and debris and paint, but not too bad.
No, it's not bad at all. Let's get that cover. And you can see we've got the funnel still in the cooling system because we haven't poured it all in yet. We're waiting for the air bubbles to come out. So we'll put the last little bit in. And I like to clean as I go as I put things back together. So that's what's going on here.
I can see your renovated cutouts for your new oil storage there.
Oil storage, yeah. We used to be round drums only. And the round drums are still held very tight, round pails. But now square ones are allowed. And so the more common dimension in Europe is a more rectangular form. And so this allows us to get oil much easier. The round pails, although common in North America, are not particularly common here.
Yeah, it's been a real hassle to get them if we wanted them that way.
Maybe not a hassle so much as just few suppliers have it.
Your supply choice is limited.
Correct.
So we got 2 of the round ones in already, and then we're going to put those 2 square ones in on top.
And then this is just this is an empty container that I use to hold waste oil. And the bottom piece is just to prevent wear on vibration. We once wore through, cracked one of these rubbing against down below in rough seas.
It's amazing because they're such strong containers.
They're
it's
really
amazing
durable containers, so it's almost impossible to believe that you could do that, but we did. And these 2 are shims because the round ones are longer, so when we go to all square, that won't be necessary any longer.
So that just secures them top and bottom.
Yeah, they won't go, the boat turns upside down, they're still there.
Now why did you leave that one to last?
It can't be put on though before this is on, so the reason it has to be off for a valve job, or it's easiest, it doesn't have to be off, it's much easier to put that on if the air filter box is off. So I like to push the hoses on first and then move the clamps to their proper location.
It looks like it went on pretty easily, pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Engine's looking pretty complete now.
Small amount of antifreeze is not in there yet, which means there's air bubbles and something in the system, but after it's been warmed up slightly, I'll be able to top it off. Recapping it. Cap, air filter, air box has still got to go on there.
Is that the last thing that needs reattaching?
I think so. Still need to bleed the fuel system though, which will be likely a pain in the butt because it's, the new injectors and high pressure lines have been off.
So there'll be a lot of air in the system.
Yeah. That re-energizes the wing and the generator. Okay. So now it's got power. I'm going to take apart the J box, or take the cover off the junction box to be able to get access to the start relay. And I'll have access to the start relay to be able to crank the engine to bleed the fuel system.
Can you use your special handy dandy tool?
We are. Those of you who've watched videos before will know that I've, quote, made this relay where I've taken the cover off and I just use that as a hand start system. What's interesting is one of the viewers sent me a commercial version of this same thing where it's a relay with a switch on the end. So this actually exists.
So we didn't invent it.
So I can't charge $100 for each. Someone else is only charging $40.
But ours would come from Scotland.
Okay, that's good.
Let's see where that's sitting. Can you point to where that's sitting?
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay, so you replace the start relay with that.
Yeah, exactly. First, we're going to have to bleed the low pressure side. I usually just pop this off and give it a little bit of a pump. Shouldn't take much because it was only the high pressure that was apart. And I'm pumping on the fuel pump.
And that should...
There it goes. So there's fuel popping out right there.
Oh, cool.
So that means we're done. Not very much required there.
So that's not bleed. That's not bled, is it?
The low pressure side's bled.
Okay.
Now I need to take off one of the high pressure injectors one at a time. Not injectors, pardon me, the connection at the injector, one at a time, and get fuel in the lines.
And how do you do that?
I'll use the starter to crank the engine, and I'll just loosen those off. And you got to be really careful because it can spray high pressure oil, diesel. Nothing at all yet. They're fairly loose right now, so I would think that would be adequate. Surprised that isn't enough to bring fuel through it yet. You only can let it run like that for about 20 seconds or so, maybe 30 at the outside. I'm going to give the starter a little bit of a break, and we also have to watch the airlift muffler doesn't fill up the engine, so I can't crank it like that too many times. Okay, I've just realized that what I was trying to do there will not work because the fuel solenoid's off. This is only engaging the starter, and so I've just done a quick look at the wiring diagram at the back of this manual, and that's it. And what I've done is I've looked and said, look, we could take off the fuel solenoid feed wire right here, jump it to battery power over here, and I will also put a cover over those injectors where the lines are loose so it doesn't spray. This is at the fuse. You can hear the click, so it tells you it's working.
Oh, that's the fuel pump going on when you touch that?
No, not fuel pump. That's the fuel solenoid.
Fuel solenoid, okay.
So we've got a little bit of bubbling fuel there. It's pretty good. So what I'm going to do is put a rag underneath them, but there's still not very much fuel coming out of that one yet. I'm going to do one at a time. And we've got to be careful because we've only got a limited length of time. As we crank the engine, it fills the water lift muffler. Eventually water can get up into the engine, and so you really need to be efficient on this process. So I'm going to do that one more time. Very little fuel. I don't want to crank it excessively, so I'm going to call that one good enough for now. I may find it hard to start, but we'll at least give that a try. Looks good to me.
And what's the reason for doing them one at a time? What is that? How does that help, or what does that actually achieve?
I don't know why they recommend one at a time. I think it's kind of pointless, but we'll do it.
Any evidence of fuel? Oh, you haven't actually haven't run with the second one open, have you?
Yeah, I did. That was it.
And there was a bit of fuel. Do you see any?
Yeah, not much though. So okay. I'm doing kind of a limited, only the minimum amount possible. I suspect it'll start, but I may have to do a bleed again. Just. You can see the bubbles coming up there.
Oh yeah, I see a little bit of fuel there. Yeah. Are you tightening that off?
Yeah.
Moment of truth.
started up very nicely. So doing the minimum amount on the injectors for bleeding was perfectly fine. Just a small amount of fuel showing was absolutely all that was needed. So things are looking very good. It's initially when it starts up, it was a little rough, but that's expected with the fuel system having been open. It cleared out remarkably quickly and started to settle down and get nice and quiet and starts to sound like a healthy motor. So looks like we're exactly where we want to be right now. I think I'm gonna clean it up a little bit more, check for any minor issues, and I think we're basically prepared to call that success.
That's wonderful. Did it sound? It sounded to me like it ran smoother than before. Did you just notice any difference?
It should be running pretty similar to before, because after I adjust the valves, the other one, it returns to being a 3-cylinder system again, and then it runs reasonably well. It might be slightly quieter now. I know what you mean, but I didn't hear a huge difference.
Okay, well, that is really awesome to see it running again.
The next thing we're going to do, as soon as I get this thing all settled down, I'll give it a good solid run for a couple hours, make sure everything's running well. We should go upstairs and have a look at the old cylinder head and see what we can learn from that.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, let's do that.
You hear the generator running down below? I think you're right, Jennifer. It is a little quieter than it was before.
It sounds a lot smoother to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's possibly new injectors have done that, or maybe that bad valve seat's been leaking a little bit. I mean, either one. It does sound very good right now.
Sounds great.
What we're going to do here, I don't even know what we're going to do here. I don't have the proper tools to take the valves out of that. The way the proper tools work is they grab the edge of this right here. Grab the edge of the valve spring and depress it, and then allow the keys to be removed. That's not going to happen here. I don't have those tools. And in fact, anytime you see a mechanic with a claw hammer, as I have here, usually you want to go somewhere else as quickly as you possibly can.
Earlier in the job, we examined the old cylinder head for evidence of problems. Let's see what we learned before we remove the valves.
What I'm looking for in here is we've had a valve seat problem, and so what I'm looking for is this is number 3 right here. What I'm looking for is any evidence of pock marks or damage from water in the cylinder, and there's of course absolutely nothing at all. It looks absolutely beautiful.
So that's good news then?
It is, but if you look here, you can see the valves. You can see the valve is super obviously destroyed. So
what do you see?
I'll show you. It's really interesting. I've never seen one go this badly before. You're gonna love this. It's really interesting. Okay. This is what a normal exhaust valve looks like.
Okay.
This is what a normal intake valve looks like. So
Yeah.
you can see number 2 cylinder is absolutely fine. Number 1 cylinder is absolutely fine. Here's why we're replacing the cylinder head. This is exactly what I was expecting. See that exhaust valve?
It's sitting differently.
It's way low in the head. And so what's happened is it's worn away and settled down in the head, and it's so far down that you can actually see the difference.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing.
It is.
Let me look back at the other normal one again just to compare. Yeah, so that's almost
normal.
flush, right?
That's normal, where it's in fact it's slightly proud right there.
Okay. Yeah.
And then over here it's
down.
Way down below.
Wow, look at that. Wow.
And so what's happening here is, in fact, I have a diagram around here somewhere. I'll just grab it.
Okay. Well, Spit's got the diagram.
He's standing on it.
Is
there
he?
we go.
Okay,
I got
good.
it.
Okay. He's trying to learn about engines, I guess.
He's just trying to get attention. I'm gonna get everything out of there so he doesn't cause any trouble. Okay, so here's what the camshaft is. Here's the tappet, push rod, rocker arm, and the valve assembly. And the valves are adjusted right here. There's a small amount of clearance is added in right there. And the reason that's added in is when the engine heats up, this all gets bigger, expansion. and you want to make sure that the valve's not held open. And what's happened in this case is the valves went 640 hours after adjustment, and then suddenly it closed up to 0, and so that cylinder goes down on power because the valve's not closing properly. So I adjusted it, and then 39 hours later, same thing happened. What's happening is this valve is rising up in the head, and as it rises up in the head, the clearance goes away. As the clearance goes away, the valve gets held open. Because the valve's held open, we lose power, and then I do the adjustment again. The reason why I stopped doing the adjustment is on the third one, you can see it's definitely failing, and that is way recessed into the head.
Yeah.
So that valve is completely. That valve seat's completely destroyed, and so there's no way to replace the cylinder head. I was more or less operating on spec, saying I think the head would be difficult to save,
Yeah.
but this head's not savable.
No.
The reason for it is because they don't have installable seats. On some cylinder heads you can replace the seats, but they don't have the clearance needed to have replaceable seats, and so it's...
And the seat is the part that's inside the small circle there?
Yeah, that's the seat is what the valve's pulling closed against.
I see. Okay, so it's pulling the seat. Okay, gotcha.
And so now the cylinder head's been cut away by that valve as it recedes up into the
I see.
engine. You see what I'm doing is I'm scratching the surface, just looking for any evidence or any issues at all. The entire surface looked like, when we started, like this, and underneath that there's a layer of, just a light layer of corrosion underneath the carbon. Surprised at that, actually. That one suggests that there may have been water in this at some distant time in the past. It's hard to tell for sure. The thing that catches my interest is all cylinders show similar rusting, and I suppose there will be some rust inside the cylinder head of a cast iron internal combustion engine. But it seems like, I don't know, it seems like more than I would expect.
So what would cause that?
Well, normal combustion itself produces water, so it's possible that no, it's not, because it would just blow out. It's the only thing I could think could explain that is the boat was maybe in extremely rough water sometime in the past, and
Well, it has been in some rough water.
there is no question.
Occasionally, yes.
There's no questions that it's been in some terrible water, and we have the video to prove it. But it's possible that somehow, when the boat's getting leaned over a long way, water got into this. Like maybe that time in Australia where the boat got knocked over on the river bar, possibly that the generator wouldn't have run because
To 69 degrees, yeah.
the generator wouldn't have run for a long time after that. It's possible that with the boat over on its side at 69 degrees over, that it got a little water in here and potentially did some damage. It's really hard to tell. I mean, the thing that makes me suspicious is little tiny bit of rust on all of the cylinders is one thing that makes me suspicious. The second thing is valve seat recessions, oftentimes caused by saltwater intrusion. The thing that makes me not positive that's the answer is the exhaust system appears to be functioning properly. However, because the boat's been in some unusual situations, it's possible, in fact it's probable, that has led to water being in there. And I think the lesson there is if the water inside an engine is bad, but if you get the water out of there and it's run soon after, they do fine. It's not going to cause them problems at all. So I think what needs to happen is whenever there's been extreme rough water, it's probably worth making sure this engine doesn't have any residue left in it, and the engine's been run up to temperature.
Just to boil anything off and get rid of any problems.
Exactly. Now, of course, if it was hydro-locked, I mean, if there's actually real amounts of water in here, it would destroy the engine. So it's never been hydro-locked, and it's never had any evidence of water in the oil. It may be the case it's never had water in the cylinder head at all. I'm just slightly suspicious based on what I'm seeing there, and based on that, my temptation is, well, first of all, to check this exhaust fully. But we did that in the previous video when we were diagnosing this problem. Can't find anything wrong with the exhaust. It's performing very well. So then it comes down to maybe unusual situations the boat's been in.
Yep.
And so I think the lesson there is in situations where the boat's been way over on the side or in horrendous tough weather. And so the answer is, make sure that the generator has been run after any of those events. It's easy to do. It doesn't take any time, and it might have saved this valve seat from failure, because it really shows evidence of potential water intrusion.
And you were saying that the other one or two looked like it might have some potential problems too?
The valve seats all look beautiful. There's no problem at all, and the valve adjustment's never gone out. The only suspicious event is that there's all underneath the carbon. There's a little bit of rust. Now, it might be the case. There's just going to be a little bit of rust underneath the carbon, no matter what. But I'm just looking for anything I can learn, not anything at all. And I think the exhaust is properly designed. I think the engine's been I know the engine's been properly maintained. So the only thing I can think of is either there was a water intrusion problem here, which is it's sometime in its history, or it's possible. Look, not all valve seat assemblies last for as long as all the others. It could have just died early. I've cleaned out the area above the rings. That's between the top ring and the deck surface. And what you expect to see in there is buildup of carbon. Of course, there was a buildup of carbon. And just as on the cylinder head, we had a buildup of carbon, and if you dig below the carbon, you'll find rust. Not serious rust, not a lot of rust, but there is a little bit of rust, which makes me kind of suspicious. If you look very carefully right here, you see right in there, there's little tiny bits of rust damage.
Oh, interesting.
So for sure, not for sure, but pretty much for sure, this engine has had some water in it at some time in its life.
So by rust damage, what exactly do you see?
Little, I've cleaned away the carbon and the rust, and you can see little pock marks in the metal.
I see, okay.
Those same pock marks are probably what damaged the valve
Can you
seat.
shine the light on a little bit more?
Yeah, right there, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if you get an angle where you're looking in through there, like across to here.
Yeah.
Yeah, across into there, you'll see some of that, just little bits of tiny pock marks.
Yeah, I think I can see them, yeah.
Relatively small, but it really shouldn't be there. And so my suspicion of what's happened is this boat's been hit by big waves or leaned over a long way. It's taken some water into the engine, which probably not enough to hydrolock. It's just a tiny amount of water, enough to cause a little bit of corrosion. And then the engine wasn't used for a month or so, or some long period after that. Instead, a little bit of rust damage. So what we've got is a story there that what I get out of that is it's still possible that we had an early valve seat failure at 6,700 hours, but the more likely answer is it's a little bit of water got in there. The lesson, I think, is make sure the engine gets used after the boat's been hit with big waves in a big storm or leaned over a long way. I mean, for us, that only happens every couple of years, and this could be years old, but it suggests that there probably was some water in there.
So you haven't found anything that could indicate, any other problems with the engine itself that would cause the valve seat issue?
No, it's basically everything I've seen looks absolutely perfect, except for the fact there's little bits of erosion and corrosion. Not very much, but it's a little bit in each cylinder, and it suggests that it's conceivable that it did have some water in it at some time. One possible answer is when we got knocked over in Australia, or a couple times we've been in really rough water. It's conceivable that some water did get into the generator. Obviously, it's never been hydrolocked because you can't. That would be a secret. You'd know about that.
We know that.
Exactly.
69 degrees is a long way to be over. It wouldn't be surprising if it took a little water on.
Yep, you're 100% right. Let's see what we can learn, even though we don't have the proper tools. One is, you don't have to be a really excellent mechanic to see that valve is much higher than all of the rest of the valves in the system.
Yeah, you can see that left one there is sitting much higher.
Much higher.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the other side. Very obvious here as well. You can see here's what a normal exhaust valve looks like, and here's number 3 exhaust valve pulled way up in there.
Yeah.
That's what's causing the valve to tighten up constantly. Okay. Let's see if I can get lucky. These valve springs are sufficiently easy to push down that I'm thinking I might get lucky. Yeah, that's going to work. You see, I've got one of them out already. These are the little retainers. If I can get that out of there.
So where did that come from? I missed it.
Comes from right
from the
there.
top there. Okay.
Yeah, so these are the retainers. The valve spring pushes against these.
Yeah.
And oh, I see what's happening. The valve's loosened off so far that the retainer's hardly holding it.
Oh.
So it's even easier to take apart
The
than it
other
should be.
ones are probably going to be a little harder.
I don't need the other ones apart. It's this one that I wanted to have a chance to see. You just need to get that one last retainer out of there. I'll put a socket underneath the valve so the valve just doesn't go down. This is absolutely not how it's done. However, how it's done doesn't matter as much as can it be done,
Yeah.
and it can be. So here we are. There is the damaged valve. It's all covered in carbon, as they always are. And you can see why it's probably smoother running now. When you said it's smoother running, this valve's been leaking a lot.
And how do you tell that?
It's all black. It should be a polished surface right here.
Let's see.
If I can take another one out, we'll see that. We'll see that. In here, you can see the polished surface.
Yeah, just on the edges there?
Yeah, that's the valve seat itself, or what's left of it. The valve seat used to be right there where the end of the screwdriver is,
Yeah.
and it's now receded all the way down into there.
I see.
So it's actually slowly pulling through the head.
Wow.
This definitely did not need to run any more hours than it did already. Very serious wear on that valve seat. Unusually serious wear. I'm going to see if I can take another one out just because I'm finding this super interesting.
Is it harder to get that other one out?
It is. Yeah, I may not succeed at this one. I feel like it's close to being able to be removed, but it's actually, you know what I might do? It means you have to stop filming, but I'll push this down and you can poke that out of there.
I was wondering if I could do that.
I just have a feeling that's not going to be very hard to get out of there if I've got the valve held down.
Okay.
Got it, with your help. Needless to say, I would recommend buying the proper tool if you do this professionally.
So what do you see different there?
Yeah, it's actually not a whole lot different. It's not as polished as I would expect it to be. So maybe I'm wrong on the other one. You can see though that one thing that is concerning is that texture in there.
It looks like rust.
It looks like corrosion, where this valve has a smaller amount of it, and I'm betting if we take out number one, we'll find smaller yet again. So we keep finding more and more indications that even though we're the owners of this boat since day one, and we know that the exhaust system, I've checked the exhaust system out and it's working properly. It doesn't allow water to accumulate in the exhaust. Nonetheless, it's not very clear, but it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that there has been water in here. I'm just finding too much evidence of pitting and wear that corrosion that you wouldn't expect to see. I think the lesson here is, unfortunately, for a seagoing vessel like ours, where it will see some very rough conditions, and it has been rolled over a long way, it's been hammered with big waves on the side, it's possible to force water up into the engine. If anything, if it was a large amount forced up, I would know about it because it wouldn't start, it would hydrolock. But small amounts have been pushed up in there, especially if the generator doesn't run for a very long period of time. Like say we're crossing the North Atlantic and we're going to the Kinsale, Ireland marina. Which is what we did. This generator did see very tough conditions in the North Atlantic, or the whole boat saw.
Everybody saw rough conditions.
It was really rough. Exactly right. And so it could have taken a little bit of water up into that head, and then we went to Kinsale Island at the marina and sat there for a month. It might be the case that some of this damage was done as a consequence of that, and I just was never aware of it, which, you know, sort of sucks. For me, the lesson here is, first of all, always check a wet exhaust system, because amazing how many design flaws there are in them. Our wing engine is actually compliant with the manufacturer's specification, but we put a check valve in the exhaust to prevent water ingress under extreme conditions, because no matter how you design them, there are conditions that could drive water into there. I suspect we've seen this. This is evidence that the generator may have seen a small amount of water that sat in the engine for quite a long period of time, and it's done damage that's visible to the valves, and damage that's extremely visible to the seats. They're eroding away. That number 3 seats is really bad.
Turn that around.
I'll show you that again. Listen to that generator run.
It sounds good. It's so nice to hear
awesome.
it running.
It sounds great. Let me get those little retainers. Yeah, here's the difference in valve seats. This one's recessed way into the head,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and this one is not.
Close to the right spot. Yeah.
And so someone asked earlier in a comment on, I think on the website or maybe on YouTube, saying, why not just rebuild the head? And 2 reasons. One is these seats are not replaceable, so it's just part of the head. And the second is, when the damage is that bad, you can't rebuild the head. I mean, I didn't know it was going to be that bad, but I suspected it might. But for sure, that's not a rebuildable head.
And the water flows from number 3, which is on the right, to left, and so that's why it would be the worst.
There should be no water.
Well, no, there shouldn't be any water, but if the water did get in, it would go from right to left. Is that
What happens is these exhaust valves. These exhaust valves are opening up to here, and so this exhaust valve goes to there, and this exhaust valve goes to there, and then the exhaust from here flows to there, and then out of the boat. And so if any water did come in, it would have first arrive at this cylinder, then this one.
Yeah, so that's why it would be the worst.
Yeah, and if you look at the valve, if you look at the number 2 valve, it's this. I can tell by looking at it right away. You look at that and you say, small amount of corrosion. That's number 2.
Yeah.
Very large amount of corrosion.
Number 3, this looks a lot worse.
It's just destroyed. And I'm guessing if we took number 1 out, it'd probably look a little bit better than number 1. Than number
But it looks
3.
like corrosion sort of below the surface, like it's corroded and then run a lot since then.
Yeah, I think it was a long time ago, because if you look at the cylinder head, you couldn't see any corrosion at all anywhere. And as I scraped the carbon away, you can see below it there was corrosion. And so I think that there really is a lesson here for us, Jennifer, where we just have to remember, if the boat ever gets really beaten up in tough seas, and we both do our best to avoid that.
Yes,
but
it happens.
If that happens, probably the right thing to do is run the wing, run the furnace, and run the generator sometime afterwards, just to make sure there's nothing wrong with it.
Burn off any water that may got in.
If moisture did get in, burn it off. Exactly right. And so I kind of feel like I should have known that already. And on one hand, a design shouldn't have that flaw, but on the other hand, wet exhaust systems always have a breaking point. They always have an angle that's just too much for them. So I think it's best to always make sure that the engines are run sometime after, if they've seen ridiculously difficult conditions. Well, let's walk inside and just poke your head down into the to hear how wonderful that generator sounds. It's running at full load, not full load, but it's running at load right now.
Sounds great. That's wonderful. Very nice work, James.
You as well. Thanks very much for your time, and on to the next problem.
You can read more about our trip around the world at mvderona.com, including an interactive map showing our track with a live update of our current location.